here, which are yes, and he had a flock of cows, which are not a flock, a herd, which are behemoths. And he says he's giving his behemoths and his chayes to hekdesh or something. And then it turns out that in amongst all those animals, there's a koi. A koi. A koi is an animal that we do not know what it is. In other words, for whatever reason, the Chazal were unable to put a label, chaya or behema, on a koi. And there is an opinion that it's min bifnei atzmo, a berry of bifnei atzmo. It's a unique third category, neither a behema nor a chaya. So if you donate all your animals to Beis Hamikdash, except you use the term chaya and behema, if a koi is an independent freestanding animal, the question will be, what is it in or is it out?
Over a koi?
Yeah, because of the suffix.
You get the word koi.
Okay. It's koi. All right. So Rabbi Eliezer says, but you didn't mean the koi, because when you're talking about giving away your stuff, you tend to be more restrictive than broader. If you meant to give everything, including the koi, you would have said so. So, and that's similarly with regard to indistinct vow, etc. And so he says you wouldn't mean to restrict yourself more broadly. Amalei Abaya, where I'm assuming that David finished the daf, the blot yesterday. Okay. So we're on Yud Tes. That's where I just said. We're on Yud Tes Amid Aleph, the end of the first line. Omelei Abaya challenges Reb Zera, and he says, "B'mai ukimta l'safek niziros lahakel." What did you do? What proof did you bring to being lenient with Nazirus, which, by the way, is the opposite of what that Mishnah says, if it's equated in that Mishnah? How are you proving it? Rabbi Eliezer, you're backing it up by bringing the case of the koi from Rabbi Eliezer. A Maseifa, but let's look at the end of that other Mishnah that talks about a doubtful animal, right? It says over there in that Mishnah, Safek Becharos. Now let's say you have a pregnant cow, and you thought that nothing's happening for a while, and you go to sleep, and you wake up the next morning, and lo and behold, there's a boy calf and a girl calf. Okay, you don't know which came first. You were sleeping. So you have if the boy came first, he's a bachor. If the girl came first, the boy's stam an animal. So what's the halacha? So that brisa says, okay, by the way, there are two other kinds of bacharas, a human being, obviously, a pidyon, a ben. And then there's the unique case of the firstborn male child of a donkey, which also is a peterechem, and it has a special ceremony and so on and so forth. Yeah. Okay. So Safek Becharos, you don't know whether this person or animal is the firstborn male or not. V'echad bechare behem. It doesn't matter. Echad bechare adam. It doesn't matter if it's a human being. Bechare behema ben tamei or ben tahira. It doesn't matter whether it's a donkey or an edible animal, a goat, a calf, a kid, or a lamb. Okay. Hamotze mechavero of araya. even though that animal has built-in kedusha if it's a bachor, since there's a doubt, a kohen can't come and claim the animal. He has to somehow look at the video camera of what was going on in that barn and determine that the boy was born first. Otherwise, he can't take the animal. So we go lakula. On the other hand, because of the suffix, but the Mishnah teaches about that suffix animal, the isurim, the giza avoida, the restrictions of a bachor. You cannot shear it if it's a sheep or a goat, or you cannot work it if it's a calf to pull a plow or something. Those restrictions are on it, al suffix. So that shows that in the case of a doubt, it's true when it comes to the dini mamanis, we don't take it away from the guy. But when it comes to the kedusha of bechor, safek, we go lechumra. We don't let him work the animal or shear the animal. So how does that and that also is Rebbe Lazar. So how can Rebbe Lazar be lenient on regard to the, what? Two animals were born.
Either animal can be worked.
What? No, the girl is not a bachor. A girl is never a bachor. Perhaps you're right if a person has twins and their lights go out in the middle of the birth and you don't know who came out first. So maybe you do opinion without a bracha on the other kid. No, the example we gave is we do not know if the boy was born first and therefore is a bachor, the male, or the girl, the female, was born first, in which case the male is not a bachor. That's the case. Twins were born. We do not know the order of the birth. So when it comes to dine mamanos, we say that we go l'chumra really both ways. When it comes to dine mamanos, is it the kohen's property? We say, no, it's not his property. He would have to prove that it is the bachor. When it comes to dine kedusha, we say the owner has to treat it as kadosh unless he can bring proof it's not. Yes, Sidney.
Two male animals. Yeah.
So then they would be both treated as a bachor as al safek. Yeah, again, the kohen couldn't take either one, but the guy couldn't work either one. That's right. Okay, if it happened to be two males and there was no videotape.
Well, the videotape wasn't clear.
Okay, or if the videotape wasn't clear.
Just that's it. They're going lost.
So Reb Zera says this is not really a contradiction. There's a humongous difference. When it comes to the kedusha of a bachor, that's intrinsic to the animal. When it comes to an individual making himself a nazir, that's his personal choice. Right? So Zera answers, Amalei, he says back to Abaya, Amai kam damis kedusha habo miele le kedusha habo b'ne abidei adam. How can you compare intrinsic kedusha, which happens with the bachor, or the voluntary kedusha that the man makes himself a nazir? That's his choice. So that's not an issue. But the Gemara just reports to us, because it wants to be intellectually honest, if there is a problem with Rav Zera's comparing the Naziris vow that's doubtful to the case of the indeterminate but not doubtful neder, here is what we're talking about, okay? Suffolk mashkin letame. When there are levels of tuma. Okay, the lowest level of tuma is usually referred to as pasul because it becomes tame, but it's the end of the line. It cannot transfer tuma anymore. So if it's something is a rishon letuma, it can create a shane. It depends on if it's chulin, if it's kudshim. But the bottom level of tuma in any case, sometimes it's a sheni, sometimes it's even a revi'i, does not transfer tuma anymore. There's no such thing as a chamishi by kudshim, and there's no such thing as a shlishi by chulin. So we're going to talk about now liquids, and we're going to raise the following question. Does the Torah make liquids tameh? In other words, is there a category of tameh liquids in the Torah? Or is that a rabbinic restriction that the rabbis put on? So one of the big differences might be, if it's a rabbinic rule, there's a concept, ein shvus b'mikdash. So anything that's a rabbinic rule does not apply in the Beis Hamikdash, and that's going to play in here. Okay? Safek mashkin l'tameh. The question of whether a liquid became tameh or not. Okay, so now it's a suffix. Now remember, if it's the Rabbanan, suffix the Rabbanan lahakel. If it's with Torah rules, suffix Rabbanan lachumra. So that would make a very big difference whether it's we hold it to be diraisa or the Rabbana. Okay? So what we respond to that is they're tameh. We go lachumra because maybe it's suffix diraisa, and we go lachumra. On the other hand, latame acherim, to that tame, maybe tame liquid to be matame something else, we do not say that the second thing that touches that tame liquid remains tahor. Divrei Reb Meir, that's Reb Meir's opinion. Now, how does all this come up? Rabbi Elazar, Aimer Kedavarav. Rabbi Elazar agrees with Rabbi Meir. Now we're going to ask a question. Is it really true that Rabbi Eliezer, who is what we were talking about before, Rabbi Eliezer, do we say that we have to add the word suffix? Do we say really that Rabbi Elazar, when it comes to a suffix tame on a liquid, that they're called tame? Okay. Vasanya, we have a brisa that says otherwise. Rabbi Elazar, Aimer, ein tuma lamashkin kol iker. It's not diraisa, it's not tame at all. The Rabbanan, fine, the rabbis have added a category. But min haTorah, it's not tame whatsoever. The Teda, I can, literally, it means you should know, but it means I can prove it. Okay? Kahare ha'ed Yosef ben Yoezer, Ish Tzereda, he actually testified before the Sanhedrin, Ayel Kamsa, regarding a certain grasshopper. Okay, there are some grasshopper and grasshopper-like critters that are kosher. There are others that are not kosher. The way we know if it's kosher or not is there's a Masorah. Okay? So they're talking about this grasshopper called an ayel. Well, comes in grasshopper, but subspecies or category of grasshopper called the ayel grasshopper. And he says into the Beis Din, I have a Messiah, which means it's a kosher min. Okay? And then they ask him another question about the Beis Hamikdash, about the Korbanos when the Beis Hamikdash was existed, and he testifies. The ayel is dachan, meaning it's clean, meaning it's kosher. And then he also testifies al mashkin beis matbachaya. In the Azara, the north side of the Azara had tables and hooks, and that's where they slaughtered and butchered the korbanos, because they have to be cut up to put on the mizbeach for the kohen to eat part of it, etc. So when you do this butchery, there's blood splurting all over the place. There's also water because you're washing the animals down. There may also be other liquids you can imagine for yourself. Okay. And what is that stuff all tame? Or can it become tame? And if it becomes tame, can it transfer tuma? So he testifies, dacham, those liquids are tahor. Now, does he mean, remember, ain't shvus b'mikdash? So when he says there's tahor, does he mean that they're tame, but they can't transfer tuma? Or does he mean they can't become tame? That would be a big difference, whether it's the Eraisa or the Rabbanan. Okay? So the Gemara comments, ha nicha de Shmuel, that works fine. According to Shmuel's understanding, the Omar Shmuel says, Dachan milatame acherim. They can become tame, but they cannot transfer tuma. Okay? Aval tumas atzman yesh behem. But they actually can become tame. So then what he meant was they're dachan in the sense they can't transfer. So that makes it fine and dandy. Shapir. Ela Rav. But Rav, the Omar Dachan Mamish, who says that liquids cannot become tame at all min ha'Torah, ma'ikal amemer. Then what are you going to say? Okay, okay. So basically, according to Rav, now I'm paraphrasing the English here. You can't say that the Safek Naziras is treated leniently, can't be Rav Elazar. We still have the basic problem. Why does our Mishnah say that indeterminate Nidarim must be treated Machmir, Chumrah? Okay, but the Mishnah that talks about the Naziris, questionable Naziris, goes Lakula. We have that conflict reopened. Okay, Ella ha Rabbi Yehuda. So we have to say that the two Mishnayos, since they can't be reconciled, have to have two authors. The Mishnah over there regarding Naziros is going like Rabbi Yehuda, Vaha Rabbi Shimon, but our Mishnah on Nidarim is authored by Rabbi Shimon. Okay, and how do we prove that? The Sanya, we make the following brisa. Hareini Nazir im yesh bichri hazeh meyakur. I'm standing in a barn or in a granary, and there's a large pile of grain there. And I say, I will be a Nazir on the condition that we weigh that pile of grain and it weigh 100 kur or more. That's my Tanai. Okay? And now what happens? Vahalech, somebody goes to get the scale. The so when he gets back, shenagav osha avad. It's clear that the pile of grain is only half the size it once was. Somebody took it or it got blown away. In other words, the circumstance now is that the pile is obviously less than 100. Or it's not there at all. And we have absolutely no way of turning back the tape and weighing what isn't there anymore. So the question is the guy a Nazir or isn't he? Rabbi Yehuda Matir. Rabbi Yehuda says that the neder is inapplicable because you can't prove the case. Rabbi Shimon Oiser. Rabbi Shimon says, no, you have a Tanai. We can't prove it either way. We go l'chumra. So that is in accord with our Mishnah that says a stam is lahachmir. So now we have the Mishnah over there on is Reb Yehuda, and the Mishnah over here is Reb Shimon. It works very nicely. However, we haven't got absolute clarity yet with regard to what Reb Yehuda's opinion is. V'rami Rabbi Yehuda, we can bring two memories from Rabbi Yehuda, and they disagree with each other. They contradict each other. Mi Amar Rabbi Yehuda lo ma'ayil inish nafte l'sveika. So does Rabbi Yehuda say that you do not put yourself in the position of not doing what you said you're not going to do, like becoming a nazir? You're not going to drink wine. You're not going to get a haircut. You're not going to be mitame to a mace, right? Does the doubt set you up as a nazir? V'ramin, who I'll challenge that by bringing another Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Stam Truma. Somebody has something, and he says this is going to be Truma. Now, the word Truma has more than one meaning, right? You can make it. The word Truma is used, for example, to regard the Machzis Shekel, which is Trumas Halishka, where you make a gift to the Beis Hamikdash for use in purchasing korbanos, and that's called, use the word truma. We also have the word truma where you give something to a kohen. Now, I can give my truma to a kohen and he can invite me to dinner. But I can't eat truma. But that a human being is getting. So I could have two different lashonos. I could mean two different things when I say this is truma. All right, you got that? So stam truma, when it comes to stam truma, be Yehuda asura. In the geographical territory called Yehuda, we treat that as meaning trumas halishka. And it has to go to the Bedek Bias. It has to be put in the special room, and those can only be used for korbanos, okay? The Galil muteres, but in the Galil, it's not considered trumas halishka. It's considered trumas hakohen, because if you live far away from the Beis Hamikdash and you use the word truma, most likely you mean that you're going to give it to a kohen because he gets a cut of all the grain. But the most contact you have with Trumas Halishka is once a year. Some guy comes around and collects a maxis shekel from you. So that's nowhere near the top of your mind when you're harvesting in the summer. So we assume the Galil Muteres, we're not talking about Trumas Halishka. She'ein anshe Galil makirin es Trumas Halishka. Because they do not have Trumas Halishka on the top of their head. Time de'ein makirin. So if we analyze Reb Yehuda's statement, we're saying, well, it's a geographical issue. It's not on the top of their mind. Ha makirin. But if they happen to be very familiar with the concept of Trumas Halishka, asurin, we would have to go l'chumra. So again, it ties in with our Mishnah, and this time it's Rebbe Yehuda. Okay, that's a little tricky, because if it's mamish stam, he's going l'chumra. If they do know, so now it's 50-50. So that's what's indeterminate or a suffix. But if it's 99.9 versus 0.01, then we do not go l'chumra. That's Reb Yehuda's point. So now Reb Yehuda could be our Mishnah. Okay? So Omer Rava, Gave Kri, let's go back to the case of the pile of grain and the guy deciding he's going to be a Nazir if the pile is big enough. Okay? Over there, Rav Yehuda says he's not a Nazir. And he says there's a special reason, and this we need to explain. If you make yourself a Safek Nazir, you have to, and you say you have to comport yourself as a Nazir, it's going to be impossible to come out of Nazirus because you can't bring a korban al safek. Either you're making kodesh or it's not kodesh. So if I'm a Nazir, I can't say, well, if I'm a Nazir, these animals are being kodesh and I'll be makriv them. And because I can't do that, because maybe I'm not a Nazir, and then I'm bringing cholin into the Azara. So there is a discussion in the Rishonim that, but what about if I say if it's I'm a Nazir, it's kodesh alts my korbanos of Nazirus, and if I'm not a Nazir, they are matanas. It's a nedava. There is that discussion, but we're sticking to the base.
No problem ever allow Naziris when there's no out, there's no escape.
Because I can no. If I say right here, right now, I'm a Nazir for 30 days, bli neder, then I can't ever go out of Naziris because there's no Beis Hamikdash. But when there was a Beis Hamikdash, I bring an asham, a chatas, and a korban nazir, which is like a shlomim, and then I shave all my body here, and it's over. So you could. They're talking about the theoretical. Remember, the Beis Hamikdash is going to be rebuilt tomorrow. So if I declare I'm a Nazir, it's because I'm going to, and it's got, Mashiach is coming, God's going to lower the new Beis Hamikdash on a string from heaven like a yo-yo. It's going to replace that thing on the top of the platform, and we're going to have korbanos again. So I can become a Nazir. They're talking about when there's a Beis Hamikdash. But now he's going to do something tricky. He's going to say, since the safek, you can't bring the korban, you can't ever get out of the Nazirus. So we don't want to go l'chumra because we're making this guy bite off far more than he can chew. Okay? So Gavi Kri Kasavar, when it comes to the pile of grain, that's a problem for Reb Yehuda. Calls this the feikai chomer mivadai, that the doubtful case of Nazirus is actually worse, so to speak, than the certain Nazirus. Lo ma'ayel nafke l'sveika. And nobody is going to want to do that to himself. Okay? Now, the ilu gave Nazir vadai megaleach umevi korban v'nechel. Because if you're a certain Nazir, you get your hair cut, you bring your korban, depending on which korban it is, Kohanim or Kohanim and other people eat them, and finished. The Nazirus is over. Al tzveiko lo matzi megaleach. But when it comes to the safek, now they use a shorthand here. He can't get the haircut. He can't bring the korbanos. Nobody can. It can never end. Omerle Rav Huna Rav Yehuda. Omerle Rav Huna Bar Yehuda LaRava. So I like to think this is the same Rav Yehuda's son, Rav Huna. He says, Hareini Nazir Olam. There are three kinds of Naziras. There's the time delineated Naziras, A person can make himself a nazir forever, and the person can make himself a nazir like Shimshon. Those are the three categories of naziras. The first one, no haircut, no grape products, no being mitame to a mace, even your parents, for 30 days. You go through the process, it's over. The second one is forever. You cannot be mitame to a mace ever. You cannot eat or drink grape products ever. And with regard to haircuts, every couple of years, when your hair is literally dragging on the ground and tripping you, you can go through the Corbin/haircut process, but it doesn't end your naziros. It just means you're not tripping on your beard anymore. So every block of time, probably a few years, you're allowed to go through to go. That's a leniency for a nazir li'olam. With regard to a nazir shimshon, he can never drink wine. He can be matame to a mace who's a relative or a mace mitzvah or something, but he can never get a haircut or shave. There is that leniency for a nazir olam does not exist. So now we're going to talk about those cases. So what if you say, Omar Hareini Nazir li olam, I make myself a permanent nazir mai, what's the din? The question now is, there's no distinction between vadai and safek. If you're a vadai, so you said you're doing it forever. If it's a safek, you're still doing it forever like you would with a safek on a 30-day. So there's no real difference anymore. So maybe when it comes to a nazir oilam, we should go l'chumra, because you don't say he wouldn't make it worse on himself. So Amar Le, Rava replies to Rav Huna, nazir oilam nami. The rule still applies to a nazir oilam. The feiku chomer mivadai, because the suffix is worse than the vadai. The ilu vadai, if he was a vadai. Hakaved sa'aro mekil. If his hair gets sa'ar, if his hair gets too long to be too heavy, they use the lashon. He can cut it off. Umevi shalosh behemoths, and he does the 3 korbanos. But the suffix not the ilus vekulo. But if there's a doubt, he can't do that. So we still have a distinction. So Rabbi Yehuda could say, I cut the guy some slack because of the almost unbearable conditions of a suffix nazir la'olam. Okay? So Rav Huna Bereb the Rav Yehuda says another kata. Omar Hareini Nazir Shimshon. What if I make myself a Nazir Shimshon? Now it's actually more lenient. I can get haircuts. I can be matame. So maybe we should be more stringent.
Take haircuts at all, but
I can't take haircuts at all, but I can be matame. So there is a kula there. I can be matame. Amalei Nazir Shimshon Latanya. Yeah, good. Nice question. But that's not what the Bryce is talking about. So you can't ask me that. So he says, Amalei, Rav Huna says back to him, but there's a cognate brisa to the first brisa, and the cognate brisa says, Ha'amar Rav Ada bar Ahava Tanya Nazir Shimshon. He takes this exact same wording and he throws in Nazir Shimshon. So now, yeah, I do have my question. So Omerle, Tanya. Okay, if it exists, that brisa, okay, that brisa exists. And I don't have an answer for you. All right. So Rav Ashi has an answer. Hey, Rabbi Yehuda. Now, remember, sometimes a Tana says something in his own mind. In other words, I say my opinion. And sometimes the Tana reports someone else's opinion. He may or may not agree. He's just telling you that. Okay. And we don't know whether he agrees or not. So we can bail Rabbi Yehuda out by telling you, Hahui Rabbi Yehuda Mishum Rabbi Tarfon he. The Rabbi Yehuda mentioned in the Brisa that also mentions the Nazir Shimshon. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't necessarily give his own opinion. He cites Rabbi Tarfon. This Tanya, we have another Brisa. Okay, so now we're going to have another suffix. And the distinction with the pile of grain suffix is it can never be resolved because the grain ain't there anymore. But now comes a new case. Zev and I are walking from here to Yarmouth E. And Zev said, if the next person we encounter is Reuven Zev Podolsky, I'll become a Nazir. And I say, fine. And if it ain't Reuven, if it's anybody else in the world, I'll become a Nazir. You don't have to, but I will. That's the case. Okay? So how does that case differ from the grain case? We have to know that so we understand what's going on. The grain case can never be resolved. That case, if we stop walking and wait for somebody to come to us, it will either be Reuven or it won't be Reuven. It might be Brummy. We saw two beards in the distance. We don't, they're both short beards. So I don't know who it's coming. But eventually one of them will get there. It'll resolve itself. And theoretically, one of us will become a Nazir and one won't, based on the resolution. So that's the case. Rav Yehuda Mishum Rabbi Tarfon Aimer Ein Echad Mehem Nazir. Neither one is a Nazir. Why? Lefi Shelo Nitna Nazirus Ela Lahafla. A vow of Nazirus doesn't work unless it's unconditional, unless it's absolutely clear. So now, if this case where it will become clear, Rabbi Tarfon says you're not a Nazir, halachas kama v'kama, where it can never become clear, you wouldn't be a Nazir. Right? You look puzzled. You got that? Okay. If that's the case, my arya shenigav o shenavad. So why did you even bring the case that it will never become clear? Why didn't you just
Stolen.
correct?
I was there, then it could become.
Yeah,
clear.
but so then it's the exact same case as the case of the guy in the distance.
That's right.
But why did we bring the case of we can never resolve it because of circumstances when we already have a case, even if you can resolve it, Reb Tarfon lets you off the hook. Why? In other words, what's the point of starting with the other case? This case is more interesting because even if it can be resolved, Reb Tarfon says he doesn't become a cook.
Walks away.
Somebody will come by. If we stand there long enough, somebody will come by. And it'll either be Reuven or it won't. In other words, ultimately, there will be a resolution if we stay in the parking lot. Somebody will come out of the building. Somebody will cut a shortcut to the shul. Eventually, somebody's going to pass us.
I thought, I'm trying to understand what the difference was.
The difference before was there was a huge pile of grain. I say if it weighs 1,000 pounds, I'm going to be a Nazir. And then I ran off to get an industrial scale. And when I come back, it's clear the pile's not there anymore.
I could tell if it was.
You said 1,000 pounds, maybe it blew away in the wind.
Exactly. Maybe somebody took it. Maybe it blew away. Maybe only a little of it's left. There's only 12 pounds for sure there. But so the kasha can never be resolved. The situation has changed. The case of the man in the distance will resolve itself eventually. Definitely, I'll encounter another human being between that moment and the end of my life. And if it's Ruvain, I'm a Nazir. If it's not Ruvain, I'm not. And yet, Rav Tarfon says that's not clear enough. I can't be a Nazir. So why go to the empty barn case?
That's the point he wants to make.
That's what he's trying to say.
Heck, he still didn't.
He still wouldn't be a Nazir because he didn't know what it weighed when he said the statement.
Law.
There's no haflah. So why drag in the missing grain when you could have just said until you know the weigh it first and make your Nazirus? So Ella Laudiacha Kaicha the Reb Shimon. He wants to explain to us how powerful Reb Shimon is. Reb Shimon would say by the guy in the parking lot, one of us is for sure a Nazir. And even when you make a condition and the condition cannot be resolved, he's sticking to our Mishnah, the interpretation that suffix, that stam equals suffix. And Reb Shimon says you're definitely a Nazir with all of the implications thereof, al suffix, meaning you can never get out of it. So the whole point is to show us how strong Kisavar ma'ayel inish nafshe l'sveika, that a person does, you got to give him the benefit of doubt. He knows what he's doing, and he realizes that making himself a nazir al safek is a big problem, but he's doing it anyway. Okay? Now we're going back to the Mishnah, and we're going to pick up on this truma that the Mishnah mentioned. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Stam Truma, Yehuda, etc. When you're talking about the word truma in Yehuda, since people understand that there's truma salishka, we say that we go lechumra, exactly the way the Mishnah says. We go lechumra, and we say and it doesn't matter whether it's grain and it could have been trumas to a kohen or not. We say it has it's like a cherem, it's a hektish. Okay? And the Mishnah said, but if it was in Galil, we don't. And then the Rabbi Yehuda said, makirin, but if the people in Galil study Gemara, whatever, and there's a kat in Galil who do understand that truma could mean to the lishka, then we go lechumra, asurin. It would be asur to him. Okay, alma feka lechumra. So we see that Reb Yehuda agrees that a suffix is lechumra, and he could be the author of our Mishnah. Okay. I am a seifa, but let's look at the end of our Mishnah. Stam charamim. We have another category where you make something a cherem. Okay, now again, when I use the word cherem and I'm near the Beis HaMikdash, I might most likely mean it's cherem lemikdash. I'm donating this candlestick made of gold to the Bet HaKabayis. But there's also cherem lekohen, where when you put something cherem lekohen, that means I'm going to give this candlestick to either my favorite kohen or the first kohen who comes by. So it'll probably be Mel, because he's right next door. Okay? Be Yehuda Mutorin. In Yehuda, where we figure most Kahanim live in Yehuda. So I could easily mean I'm going to offer it to Mel, or I could mean I'm donating it to the Bet HaKabayis. So we go leniently. We allow me to say that, no, I meant I'm giving it to a Kohen. Okay? Ubegalil asurin. But in Galil, we say it's usher because Kohanim in the Galil are few and far between. So when you use the special form of a neder to a cherem neder, you most likely, again, it's 99% that you're giving it to the Bedek Abayas on your next trip on a Yom Tov. So, okay, so that doesn't work with Reb Yehuda anymore. Hamakirin. So here, if you do the analysis, the reason we say it's usher is because the guy in Galil doesn't know so much, and all he knows is the word cherem is associated with the Beis Hamikdash. But if he learned a little more, he'd know I could, there's a cherem lekohen. So here, the chumrah, if he knew something, it would be lakula. It wouldn't be lachumrah. So now that can't be Reb Yehuda. Alma tveka lakula. So we see that Reb Yehuda ultimately, bottom line, will go lakula, will not be like our Mishnah on the previous page, and therefore we're stuck with that Mishnah being Reb Shimon, and we'll pick up there tomorrow. Okay, it was a little complicated with the back and forth, but I tried as best I could to make it clear.
But Martha, do you know who's teaching the Mishnah Berurah class?
I have no idea.
Anybody know? No.
What's the question?
Who's giving the shear on Mishnah Berurah?
Switch around.
Oh, it's different individuals.
Or different people? Do you know where they're holding?